Welcome to Daily Office Devotions. I'm Reggie Kidd, joining you from inside the Cathedral Church of St. Luke in Orlando, Florida. If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm glad to be with you on this Monday of the 6th week of Easter. Happy Easter. Israel's life was always supposed to be a symbol of hope for the world. So, a few words about the first half of Leviticus chapter 25, which would have been yesterday's reading. Every 50 years, Israel was to proclaim liberty throughout the land. A jubilee for you, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10. At the end of last week's readings in Leviticus, we saw how Israel was instructed to calculate 7 weeks between the annual feast of the first fruits, Leviticus chapter 23, verses 9 through 14, and the annual feast marking the end of the year's labors, Leviticus chapter 23, verses 15 through 21. Beyond that, Israel was to mark off not just her weeks, but her years according to a similar pattern. Every 7th year was to be a sabbatical, Leviticus chapter 25, verses 1 through 7. Then after 7 cycles of 7 years, at the 50th year, an additional Sabbath year was to be observed. On the Day of Atonement in that 50th year, a shofar made from a ram's horn was to sound, marking the year of Jubilee. All land was to revert to its ancestral owners. It was to be a time of release for slaves, of the forgiveness of debts, and of additional rest for the land. Israel was to do a complete reset under the banner of liberty throughout the land, Leviticus chapter 25, verses 2 through 34. It was a vision that never materialized in Israel's history. See Leviticus chapters 26, 2 Chronicles 36, Jeremiah 25. It never actually controlled Israel's social life except around the margins. The Jubilee vision lived on in the prophets, however. Isaiah foresaw the coming of God's servant who would proclaim release for the captive, the year of the Lord's favor, Isaiah chapter 61, verses 1 through 4. And Daniel laid out future history in terms of cycles of 7s that would ultimately lead to one like a son of man who would assume all dominion on earth, Daniel chapters 7 and 9, and who would put an end to sin, atone for iniquity, and bring in everlasting righteousness. Daniel chapter 9, verses 20 through 27. Jesus proclaims himself to be the herald of the year of the Lord's favor in Luke chapter 4, and John shapes his book of Revelation around 7 cycles of 7, culminating in Jesus Christ's final defeat of everything evil as he ushers in a new heaven and a new earth, Revelation chapters 19 through 22. Meanwhile, what takeaways could we possibly have from Jubilee legislation? Well, for one, the logic of redemption. A constant refrain in today's verses from Leviticus 25 is this: I brought you out of the land of Egypt, Leviticus 25, 38, 42, and 55. People who know they have been bought with a price, they treat others differently. If mercy has been extended to me, I extend that same mercy to you. The freedom I enjoy as a gift, I want it for you as well. And thus, Israelites were forbidden to charge usurious interest to impoverished fellow Israelites, Leviticus chapter 25, verses 35 through 38. Fellow Israelites who became reduced to such poverty that they had to sell themselves into slavery were to be given every opportunity to work their way out of indenture, Leviticus chapter 25, verses 39 through 43 and 47 through 55. As to non-Israelite slaves, the Jubilee release didn't apply. God's covenant was with the Israelites, not with pagans in the land. The dramatic scope of the new covenant is that its gospel extends beyond Israel to include the nations. As Paul writes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek, Romans chapter 1, verse 17. God's own Son assumed the role of a slave, according to Philippians 2, and made all us former slaves who serve as if we were slaves, even though we are in reality friends. John chapter 15, verse 15. And there's a lasting inheritance. The message of Leviticus chapter 25 and its intended reset of property ownership every 50 years is that as a member of God's family, I have been given a permanent inheritance, one that I cannot sell or give away. In Moses' day, here's what that sounded like. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan to be your God. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 38. Since the coming of Christ, here's what that promise of inheritance sounds like. By his great mercy, he has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who are being protected by the power of God through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. 1 Peter chapter 1. One day, everything else I acquire in this life will go away, and I will discover that my Father's inheritance is the one truly valuable thing I have. At the heart of that inheritance is this truth: to be your God. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 38b. Be blessed this day.